Hey guys, and welcome on into the first NHL season preview show. And today we're going to be talking about the Chicago Blackhawks. We're starting with the Central Division. So Chicago is up first. And some teams have had little quiet off seasons, but not Chicago. Definitely not quiet when it comes to their off season, but we'll get to that shortly. Joining me to talk about the Blackhawks today is Alex B. Smith. People might remember him on a previous Chicago Blackhawks preview show. But for people that don't know you, Alex, maybe give yourself a brief introduction to everyone.
Yeah. So I'm Alex B. Smith, longtime hockey handicapper, and I'm the co-host of the Ice Guys podcast along with Ian Cameron. We've been doing that show. We're going to be starting our it was the eighth season now coming up. It's amazing how time flies with that. But we do our show 7 days a week. We start from opening night of the NHL, covering all the games, all the way until the end of the Stanley Cup Finals. We do live betcasts throughout the year as well too. So people can follow me on X at AX Smith Sports. You can also check out the Ice Guys on YouTube and also follow us at the_Ice Guys on X as well.
Awesome. Alex's X link will be in the description below as well, so you can go and follow him there. And the betcasts on Ice Guys, I've been on a lot of them in the past. Really fun,
Yeah.
things to go on, and then obviously making some money too is even more fun. So
Yeah,
it's been
absolutely.
great.
I mean, that's the thing. Live betting is has become such a big thing now, and so to be able to incorporate that, and well, we're all having drinks and laughs and stuff as well. It's a great balance and a lot of fun. It makes watching the games on a busy Tuesday or Thursday night a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, I completely agree. We'll get right into it. We'll start
Yeah.
here with the first segment, which is additions and subtractions. So I kind of alluded to it here. Some teams like the Wild had like two additions. Other teams like Chicago here has made quite a big changes, quite a big amount of changes in their roster here. Um, I'll let you go first here with this segment, Alex. Additions and subtractions. What are the big moves that you like here? Are there any players you're sad to see go? What are your opinions here on the Hawks off season?
Well, I mean, when you're in the middle of a rebuild, you're going to start seeing a lot of additions and subtractions in this kind of magnitude. And obviously, it's nice to see more of the additions than subtractions because obviously, with the Hawks getting Connor Bedard a couple years ago, being in solid draft positioning, they're able to free up some room and also have some cap space so they can bring in some big time signings. Laurent Brossoit is the biggest addition that I was really happy to see. The goaltending for the Blackhawks has been pretty bad the last couple of years, but Brossoit has been one of the better backups in the league over the last several seasons. Of course, started his career with Winnipeg, then had some time for the Vegas Golden Knights before going back to Winnipeg last season and being a formidable number two behind Connor Hellebuck, who ended up winning another Vezina trophy. So for Brossoit to now come over to Chicago and for at least the majority of the year will be the backup to Peter Mrazek. Of course, we'll talk about it a little bit later, where he did have surgery to repair his meniscus, so he'll be missing all of training camp in the first week of the season, but should be back into the lineup by the middle of October. Tyler Bertuzzi is another great signing, a physical forward, somebody who can kind of be that bodyguard role, for Connor Bedard, but also chip in offensively. Likes to play in front of the net and having a net front presence when you have some of these speedy guys and some of these guys who create plays like a Bedard, that's definitely a good thing to have. I would look for an increase in his points this season. Tavo Teravainen, who was originally a Hawks draft pick during the Stan Bowman days, the end of the Showtime run, he comes back to the west side of Chicago. Be interesting to see what he does now in a top six role as a more mature player and coming into a bit of a different situation. Obviously, he was trying to contend with the Cup in Carolina, now trying to kind of help this Hawks team get back into contention. And then you have some veteran presence with Pat Maroon and Alec Martinez, guys who will probably only be there for at least half a season. Those are guys who will certainly be getting some phone calls. Kyle will definitely be on the phone. GM Kyle Davidson will be on the phone fielding calls about those two guys for teams who will be looking to bolster their rosters for the playoffs. Not really much out of subtractions. Tyler Johnson, who's been a fantastic player throughout his career, but has definitely started to decline a little bit. He moves on. Sam Lafferty had some flashes of brilliance, but you trade him to get Mikheyev back, who I think a change of scenery could do him well. He had some flashes of brilliance at times in Vancouver, but now can fit in and has a more adaptable role here with the Hawks.
Awesome. I was hoping to hear you say that you were devastated to see Reese Johnson leave because he's off to Minnesota. I was hoping maybe he's a really good player, and
He's
but
decent.
I
I
guess
mean, the physical presence. It'll be fun to watch him. Drop the gloves a little bit, throw the body around too much. So he's a good fit for the Wild. I think that's a good spot for him to land. So yeah, not necessarily. He'll be a fan favorite for sure.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, looking at the additions and subtractions for the Hawks, I think it's pretty clear that there's some massive improvement here. Now, a lot of the additions aren't necessarily top line guys. I consider Bertuzzi to be more of a second line guy, but Teravainen also like a second line type forward. But
yeah,
there's still big additions to what the Hawks had last year. You're looking at the subtractions list, and yeah, there's nobody on that list that you're going to be devastated to see leave. Basically, all those
yeah,
guys that left have been replaced with better with higher type players here. Um, Laurent Brossoit, yeah, the Hawks needed a goalie.
yeah,
Alex definitely is not a fan of Soderblom, who will probably end up be backing up for the first week of the season. Maybe he gets a start. We'll have to see
yeah,
there. But Brossoit, hopefully, he comes back healthy. Bertuzzi and Craig Smith, good additions. I'm really interested to see Teravainen return to Chicago, see how
yeah,
things go for him now in his second trip. Pat Maroon, like you said, he's been going from team to team to team the last
yeah.
few years, so probably going to keep going. And Alec Martinez, um, one of the late additions signings there by the Hawks, but
Mhm.
he's definitely going to be traded. A lot of teams are going to want a guy like him heading into the playoffs. So
And here's the thing
overall,
about Martinez too, to just kind of just interject for a second, but he still gives you 18, 19 minutes a night at 37 years of age, and is still one of the premier shot blockers in the league. So, like I said, not only will he command, he'll certainly command, calls during the before the deadline, but he will be a welcome addition to that Hawks lineup where. The defense, and we'll talk about what the starting opening night lineup looks like a little bit later on. But he will definitely give some more balance. And same with TJ Brody, not as higher skilled as Martinez, but they need those stay at home defensemen to kind of work and plug in, especially when you have guys who can move the puck like a Seth Jones, where sometimes he can be a little bit of a liability if he makes a turnover on the back end. So having a guy like Martinez potentially on his side would be something that could definitely help the Hawks from situations a year or two ago.
yeah, I completely agree. We will go on to the next segment here, which is upcoming free agents. And when you look at it here, no goalies are coming up in their final year, and the only defenseman is Alec Martinez. So
Yeah,
it's not like there's a lot of turnover here in the upcoming season for the Hawks when it comes to D-men and goaltending. Bigger list there for the forwards. Um, Taylor Hall, I think, would be a good player to bring back. Obviously, unless maybe the Hawks trade him at the deadline, maybe he is trade bait. Philip Kurashev, I think, is the main guy here on this list that the Hawks are going to be focusing in on re-signing. I think if you let everyone else go and replace them in free agency, I don't think it's going to piss off any Hawks fans. We'll see what Alex thinks, but I think Philip Kurashev, restricted free agent, he's the main focus. I think for the Hawks here coming into next season. Alex, not a huge list of upcoming free agents here. Who would you really like to see the Hawks re-sign, and who are you okay with them letting go?
well, so there is a bit of a change here because of the fact, like I said, with Brassois being hurt to start the year. So in your opening night roster will more than likely be Peter Mrazek and goalie, and then Arvid Soderblom, as we mentioned, as the backup, who is an RFA at the end of the year. So he would kind of fall into that slot. But you're talking about a goaltender whose record is 7-34-4. I'm guessing the Hawks are going to move on from him after next season. With that being said, Taylor Hall and really Andreas Athanasiou, you could also kind of put them as additions in the last chapter as well, because they were gone for most of the year. Taylor Hall only played about a month and a half before tearing his ACL, so now he's back. Andreas Athanasiou had the upper body injury, kept him out for the second half of the year. So that add those guys to this lineup is huge. But yes, those will be the biggest bargaining chips, of course, along with Martinez come deadline when the Hawks are fading out of any semblance of playoff contention. Those will be the three names that will garner the most attention. Kurashev's the wild card. If he has a decent year, maybe he generates enough interest to where he gets moved at the deadline, and the Hawks can bring back some pieces right away, or they keep him to the end of the year and try to negotiate. There's several ways that things could go with Kershaw based on how he plays at the beginning of the year. So I wouldn't necessarily be sure that he just stays the whole entire year and they try to work on an extension. There's a possibility that he ends up getting moved even at the deadline because he is restricted, and a team could use that as rights to try to sign him on and extend them themselves. Donato, Maroon, Smith, all guys that are in there last year who I don't expect to really go much of anywhere. Like I said, Maroon getting up in age. Who knows? This might be one of those things where he's sticking around because he might turn into an assistant coach in a couple of years. So that's the kind of thing you look at with some of those older veterans.
Awesome. We'll move on along to possible lineup. And I do give a disclaimer here at the possible lineup. A lot of people in the comments tend to get angry with how I have the possible lineup set up. I use a depth chart on a NHL stats website to make the possible lineup. So, of course, especially with a team like the Hawks, I think we're going to see some movement here. So how the website that I looked at had things put here is Bertuzzi on the top line with Bedard and Teravainen, Taylor Hall with Dickinson and Kurashev. My thoughts there is that's actually two pretty good top lines. I think Hawks fans are going to be more happy to see this. A lot more offense. I think going to watch games will be more exciting with these top two lines. Reichel, Athanasiou, and Nick Foligno on that third line. I think maybe Nick Foligno would be more better on the fourth line. I don't know if there's. I think that third line could use another skilled, fast type player. But the bottom line, Mikheyev, Ryan Donato, Craig Smith. I think that's a pretty good fourth line. Pat Maroon will probably find himself in and out of the lineup. I don't expect him to be an 82 game player this year. I think we'll definitely see him in and out of the lineup. Joey Anderson also fighting for a spot. Alex Vlasic and Seth Jones, the top D pair. Martinez and Brody, the second. Korchinski, Connor Murphy, the third. There's improvement there. I think from what I hear, a lot of good things about Alex Vlasic. And Martinez, of course, a huge addition when it comes to the defense, which the Hawks definitely needed. And then Korchinski, another young guy that the Hawks are hoping to see a lot from. And then, yes, the possible lineup. Of course, I did this before the Brossois injury. So, of course, yes, things are a little bit up in the air with him. But he's going to miss the first week. So it doesn't sound it's not going to be a long-term type thing. Peter Mrazek, the starter. Brossois, the backup. Now, could we have a goalie controversy? Like, could we see Brossois take the starting position throughout the season? Chicago is a team, I think, where we could see some goalie controversy here, depending on how Brossois plays. Alex, what do you think of this lineup? What lineup would you like to see? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, this is definitely you could put results may vary with this lineup in many ways because one, there's a lot of plug and play pieces, right? And that's what the Hawks are kind of looking for. That's under the Luke Richardson regime. You've been looking for guys who can, achieve balance. You could put Jason Dickinson at the fourth line. You can have him centering the top line if Bedard is out. You could have Nick Foligno get some second line minutes and get some power play time. You can have Mikheyev play at any of these four spots. So having this kind of flexibility is wonderful, especially when you're talking about an 8-2 game season where injuries are imminent. So The forward group is fantastic. There's way more offense than last season. A good balance of offense, especially throughout the three lines. Like I said, the Hall and at the CU kind of additions, if you will. Those guys coming back healthy, and if they can produce offensively, we should definitely see a lot of overs with this Hawks team. The defense is getting better. Like I said, Alex Vlasic's still a work in progress, but having him along with Seth Jones, that's a solid top pairing. We mentioned Martinez and Brody, two stay-at-home guys, and I love that Kevin Korchinski, another piece of the future, can play on that third line. You don't have to throw him into that top line role too many nights where, you go back years ago with Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook. They had to cut their teeth as basically the top two defensemen with that team when they had a bunch of veterans and they were going nowhere. So being able to learn and also to learn with a guy like Connor Murphy, who has been arguably one of the team leaders for the last several seasons with the Hawks. His impact is felt a lot more nowadays in the locker room than it is on the ice. He's dealt with a lot of injury issues, but that's a good guy for Krasinski to pair with and learn from. And like you mentioned, the goaltending, I think Brossoit does end up being the starter at some point. Of course, health pending, but I think he's a better option than Mrazek in my opinion. Just overall, the last couple of years, and Mrazek, give him a ton of credit. He played very well last season, considering just how bad this Hawks team was. The Hawks only won 5 games without him in net. So he's getting older, and he stayed relatively healthy last year, was something he hasn't been able to do for the better part of his career. But I think Brossoit will definitely push and challenge him, and you have a formidable 1-2 tandem once Brossoit's healthy. That gives some flexibility. Like I said, flexibility is the key word with Richardson and company, and the Hawks definitely have more of it now than last season.
Yeah, it is good to have. And this probably won't we won't see this lineup. It'll probably change throughout the few weeks to start the season, but that's what happens here in the off season. It's fun to make guesses on how the lineup is going to go.
Definitely.
Alex, we'll go to you first here for team future bets, and then the final segment, which is player future bets. Here, what do you think about the bets here for the Hawks when it comes to team future bets this season?
Yeah, well, playoffs, I wouldn't expect that at all. So we can eliminate pretty much the top 5 slots there. 73.5 points, which would be essentially a 22-point jump from where they were last year. That seems to be within range. I don't think this team is going to be the worst team in the Central. I think there's going to be a lot of logjam in this entire division. But like I said, with the Hawks having a better balance on offense, more competitive goaltending, they're going to be able to get some wins, and they're gonna stick around the games too. This is a team where we talk about this on my show, the Ice Guys, draw season. We look at those games that might go into overtime, games that might go into shootout. The Hawks are going to be a pesky team where they can find their way to tying some games late, forcing overtime, forcing games into the shootout. So when you look at that kind of angle, that kind of takes you a little bit toward the over. But of course, with season point totals, you can play these throughout the year now at many books across North America. So I'm not jumping in on any future bets at current time. But as the season progresses, especially once we see Brossoit get back in, maybe after the first couple of weeks, I can make a better gauge and look for an over or under. I do love the alternate total looks, like I said, for other teams, of course, but certainly somewhere in the 73 to 80 range would be a successful season for the Hawks this year.
All right. Yeah, of course, I agree with you. The top five. Of course, I put the odds for all the bets here for all the teams,
Yeah,
but some apply to more teams than others. And I'm going to skip right down to the bottom there, the least points in NHL. That is something new that DraftKings has this year. Of course, DraftKings, the book I use for the odds here. And a lot of last year they had teams to finish with more points than other teams, but this year they have the least regular season team points. And I was more on that for Chicago last year. I like them to finish with the least points in NHL, but I don't this year.
yeah,
I don't. I think plus 650 looks nice. Of course, the Sharks are plus 180, Columbus plus 360, Anaheim plus 450, then the Hawks at plus 650, Montreal at plus 900, and then Calgary plus 1600.
Hmm.
So there are some other teams that I would look at. Um, I think the Hawks have drastically improved
Now,
this
the
season.
one
So
thing that could make this a valuable bet and maybe something to put in pocket now, if perhaps at a smaller unit size, would be we talked about a lot of people that could be traded out of this lineup. Even Peter Mrazek is a guy who could possibly field some calls being moved before the deadline, being a solid veteran goalie. So if you have this Hawks team where say they go through a bit of a slump in the middle of the year, but guys are playing well enough to where they get traded, then here you are in March and April where the team just completely craters and bottoms out, maybe only wins about 7 or 8 games, and then kind of competes for that spot. So it would be a more of a dart play of all the teams you mentioned. I think Columbus ends up being the worst team at plus 360. That's something I would look to bet, but at plus 650. That may not be the worst thing in the world because of just the fact that we could see a lot of roster turnovers potentially, after the Four Nations tournament in February, and of course during the deadline.
yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. And hey, people that know me know my feelings about the Hawks, but honestly, I kind of think they're going to be more closer to making the playoffs than to finish last. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs. I wouldn't
Right.
bet that,
Yeah.
but I think that they are more closer to making the playoffs than they are last in the NHL. I think that we
Yeah.
are
Like
going
you
to
said,
see a improvement.
the trajectory's up for sure, for sure. But yeah, it's not to the point of where they're knocking on the door of a wild card spot by any means. But like I said, with having another year of roster turnover, that's where the volatility comes. Next season, I definitely wouldn't be looking at anything for least points. It would be more toward something of making the playoffs. But this year, there's still enough flexibility and potential turnover to where, yeah, it makes it hard to really jump in on anything futures wise with this club right
And you don't want to rush it. I'm sure
now.
you, as a Hawks
No,
fan, you don't want them to rush it.
no,
Another top pick in this year's draft is a good thing for a
yeah.
rebuilding team. You can never have too many top five picks.
Yeah, and here's the
So
thing: you get a top pick doesn't necessarily mean you have to draft with it next year because the Hawks will end up having so much cap space still. There's still a lot of room, and with a lot of those departing players. Okay, you get a top 10 pick, but then all of a sudden here you are draft day flipping that and getting a player that's valuable for you right now. So Kyle Davidson having a lot of options. He's got all the good cards in his hand right now. Let's just see how he plays.
I completely agree. We'll go to the final segment here, which is player future bets. Looking at player point and goal props, of course, goalie wins, and then some awards down there. Starting with Bedard, 61 points last year in 68 games played. So they have him here at 35 and a half goals, 82 and a half points when it comes to the full season. Do we see him playing a full 82 game season? I think when it comes to player future bets, you're really, if you're betting something like this, you're really banking on the guy to be healthy, like 80 of 82 games, basically. You definitely don't want injuries when you're betting these type of bets. Um, for me, I don't really have much opinion when it comes to Bedard. I think if he does play a full 82 game season, I think he hits both overs. I think. What do you
Well,
think, Alex?
and
Bedard.
with the 82, I would go over with the points before goals because I projected his goals to be right around 32 to 33 goals. I think he's going to be more of a facilitator this season. Like I said, when you're adding Bertuzzi, you're adding a Taylor Hall, you're adding a Tennessee back in the line, you're adding those guys also to the power play as well. I think we're going to see a lot more assists from Bedard. I think he stays relatively healthy. Of course, he missed some extended time last year, but I think as he's getting growing older, getting more mature, we'll see his him fill out his frame. He won't be as fragile as what we saw last year. So I do believe he plays the entire season. Now the thing is, of course, if the Hawks are completely out of it at the end, they try to hold him back and maybe not play him in every game. So yes, there is something that you always have to look at that with player futures in any aspect. But I would be over his points more than his goals for sure.
All right. Kurashev. Kurashev might not be playing with Bedard. He might
Yeah,
find himself on that second. He might find himself on that third line. So for me, looking at Kurashev props, last year he had 54 points and 18 goals. So of course he hit both overs last year. Um, but now that he's most likely not going to be playing with Bedard, it's no plays there for me. Teuvo Teravainen, though, that's something really interesting. So
yeah,
last year, 53 points and 76 games played for the Hurricanes. If he's going to be seeing that top line with Connor Bedard, I want the over on 49 and a half. Yes, he was playing for a much better Hurricanes team, but he was playing down up and down the lineup, but more down on the
right.
lineup. He was on the fourth line at times. He was on the third line for Carolina. Now jumping to the top line, top power play, most likely. 49 and a half points seems to be a bit low, in my opinion, there. And then Bertuzzi. Um, is Bertuzzi going to be on the top line the whole season? Will he find himself on that second line? I'm not sure. 43 points last year in 80 games. His point prop at 42 and a half, minus 120 for the over. So no play there for me. Mrazek, 18 and a half wins, of course, is not on the board anymore, as Alex will discuss too, because of that injury. But it was at 18 and a half wins. No play for me, obviously, now that it's not there. Obviously, I can't play it. But we'll be interested to see what that number looks like when it is available again. And then the bottom two, Bedard, Rocket, Richard, plus 4,000. I had to put something, and it's hard to find awards for the Hawks when it comes
Yeah.
to awards. They're not quite in the award stage yet, but they'll get there. Richardson, Jack Adams, though, is something interesting. So that's something that I might look at. Alex kind of talked about Bedard. What do you think about the rest of the player future bets for the Hawks?
So let's start from the bottom, right? We'll get it out of the way. Yeah, Bedard's not winning the Rocket Richard Trophy, and if you were to bet on the Hawks to make the playoffs, you're better off betting Richardson to win the Jack Adams at 35-1 because that would be, I think, qualified enough. If he gets this Hawks team to a playoff spot, he would definitely win that award. So if I wouldn't advise either one, but take plus 3,500 and plus 900, and that's just kind of the way you look at that. Mrazek with the wins, like I said, that is off the board because he's now. I guess they're just adjusting because of the fact that the backup has changed, at least for the time being, where Brassois being injured. When that number comes back up, I expect it to be around 18 and a half, could be 19 and a half, maybe boosted up or juiced to the over. I would still tread lightly with that because, as I mentioned before, Peter Mrazek is a guy who's had a lot of injury issues for the majority of his career. He stayed relatively healthy last year. You wonder if that could be an issue that could spring up now as he's a year older. So I wouldn't look at anything other than under, but that would just be a stay away point. Two things that I do like: Teravainen over and Bertuzzi over, and you mentioned it. Teravainen is going to be playing a lot more top 6 minutes and top six time this year than bottom six. And especially if he's aligned with Bedard, he'll be the guy. I think, like I said, I like Bedard to get more points than goals. I think Teravainen will be the recipient of a lot of those points via goals. So, he should be able to clear the 50-point mark. And I think Bertuzzi, too, being that net front presence guy where, okay, fine, even if he's not on that top line with Bedard all the time, but even wherever you slot him in second or third line, he's going to find his way to the front of the net. And I think he's going to clean a lot of garbage up and get some goals that way. So I respect the juice being $1.20. I would take a shot with both of those. Kurashev, me personally, I'm not a big Kurashev guy. I honestly think he's a guy we could move, and probably should move by the deadline. To be honest, I just don't see his game translating as well. And with all the other forwards we have in the pipeline coming up, there's a lot of guys in Rockford who will be ready to join this Hawks team in a couple of years. I think he would be playing himself out of string anyway. So I would be looking at under for his marks, especially if he's not on that top line with Bedard, which I don't think he's gonna crack the top six too often unless there's injuries involved. So I would look unders with Kurashev, and like I said, Bedard. Of course, like I said, the points before the goals, but Teravainen and Bertuzzi, both of their points over. I really like those two spots.
Awesome. We're in agreement there. Also with Mrazek, with when it comes to the win total, if he gets traded, most likely he's going to be more of a backup, I think, for a
Right.
team
Yeah.
if he's traded. So that would hurt his win total even more because he's not going to be playing as much. So yeah, that's definitely something I would kind of
Yeah,
stay
if
away
Mrazek
from. I
gets
agree
flipped
with
to
you.
like Tampa Bay, do you think in late March he might get 2 or 3 starts just so Vasilevsky gets a rest before the playoffs? But that doesn't necessarily translate into wins. So yeah, so it's under or nothing with Mrazek for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That is the Chicago Blackhawks future show for this upcoming season. Of course, next year the Hawks are a team on the rise,
Yeah.
so things will be only getting better for them over the next few years. Alex, any final thoughts here before we end the show?
Well, no, like I said, the future is bright for the whole division, and the Hawks, the league's better when the Hawks are a competitive team, and that's the thing. They will at least be competitive. The games at 1901 West Madison will be a lot more enjoyable this season than last season, and that's all you're asking for in this what the third year now of a rebuild. You just continue to grow. You want to keep everybody as healthy as possible, make sustainable trades that can help you in the long run and just try to grow this franchise back to the dominance it once had over a decade ago.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Make sure to give Alex a follow. His Twitter/X link is in the description below. So make sure to give him a follow, and we will see you guys on the next preview show. Thanks for watching, guys.